Thank you for watching. This is the second part of my commentary on the unfortunate and horrible event of the New Zealand mosque shootings. As I had mentioned in my previous commentary on this event, that the motive for this event was pure hatred and pure evil in the heart of the shooter towards Muslims in particular. I would like to start this part of my commentary with showing my gratitude, thanks and salutations towards the New Zealand government, especially the Prime Minister, for her honorable stance with regards to the shooting, calling it a terrorist attack and showing compassion and showing inclusiveness towards Muslims, saying that they are part of the New Zealand community, which is a fact, because those people only came to that country in a lawful way, and they are law-abiding citizens. They are peaceful citizens who are contributing to their community. They did not come to New Zealand to get shot. They were just practicing their religion and going about their normal daily lives with regards to their work or with regards to their families. The stance and response from the New Zealand government and the Prime Minister is very honorable, and we show our gratitude and respect to the New Zealand government. The New Zealand people, the outpouring support from the New Zealand people was quite amazing, quite warm. We thank the New Zealand people. We thank the government and the people of New Zealand. We thank also the government and the people of Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister himself as well showed so much support for the Muslims, despite the fact that this attack did not occur on Canadian soil. The flags flew half-mast, the flags of Canada and New Zealand. We have so much respect and gratitude towards these two countries, and these countries and the people of those countries will see how much Muslims support these countries and how much Muslims are willing to sacrifice their lives for the safety and security of these countries. God forbid if those two countries are attacked in any way by an individual or a group or by another country, Muslims would be in the front line defending those countries, because those countries and the people of those countries have shown so much compassion and support and solidarity with the Muslims who are part of that community, who are part of those communities in the first place. And they should not be looked at differently from any other individual or any other group within those countries. Not like what we are seeing in the US policy, for instance, which is always trying to alienate and demonize Muslims. You can see that very clearly in the comments made by Donald Trump and senior officials in his government, how they try to always give a bad image and a bad picture about Islam and Muslims for no good reason. Yes, there have been a few attacks committed by some people in the name of Islam, especially between 2015 and 2017, and those attacks were committed by an isolated group, which is ISIS. This group, who has a very small, minute following amongst the Muslims. Muslims constitute 1.8 billion of the human population as per the census of 2015, and the maximum number of ISIS fighters at its peak was 30,000. That is less than one in every 54,000 Muslims adopted the ISIS ideology. But some people try to take advantage of those attacks to demonize Muslims in general and vilify Muslims and Islam as a religion in general. The Islamophobic rhetoric has become a normal daily occurrence. It's become normal in the Western media, and it is very normal for a Western official, politician or public figure to talk in a horrible way about Islam and Muslims. attributing attacks on Western soil to all Muslims, that all Muslims are guilty by association with that religion, despite the fact that, that Islam as a religion does not call at all towards aggression or attack on civilians. Islam is totally against that. Islam has very clear laws and regulations prohibiting Muslims from any kind of aggressive behavior towards peaceful people. And I've made that clear in my previous talk, which is titled, Does Islam Promote Violence? Please refer to that talk on my channel with the title of, my channel's title is Learn Islam. So they try to attribute these attacks to Islam as a religion and to the Muslim public and Muslim masses, which is very unfair towards Muslims. Muslims would never associate the attack on the New Zealand mosques to the white race or to the Christian religion at all, despite the fact that the shooter was clearly motivated by extremist, right-wing, white supremacist and crusader ideology. You can see this in the fact that he clearly stated that he is part of the Reborn Knights Templar, which was very famous during the times of the Crusades. Also, he clearly stated in his manifesto that he absolutely hates Muslims, especially the converts, despite the fact that Muslim converts of European descent are of the European race and they are white like him. But just by the fact that they've adopted Islam as a religion made him hate them more than even the regular Muslims who were born as Muslims. This shows you that his ideology was basically based on the hate towards Islam as a religion and Muslims as a people. And we as Muslims would never associate this attack with Christianity as a religion or with the white race in general, because we have seen the outpouring and warm support from the Christian and European people in New Zealand and also in Canada and in all the Western countries towards Muslims at these hard times. And we know for a fact that the Christian religion as a religion does not call for violence against Muslims or any other religion. It is these people who have a twisted and perverted ideology who commit such acts in the name of religion or in the name of a specific race. Just like the extremists that we have seen as well from the Muslim faith who have committed attacks against civilians. Muslims as a whole have denounced these attacks. They have totally distanced themselves from these attacks. Muslims are the ones who have fought the people who are committing these attacks. Muslims were the primary and the main target of the ISIS people. You can see in the talk that I will place in the description of this video, the PowerPoint presentation that I will link, that I will place in the description of this video, that just in the month of November of 2014, ISIS victims of 5,042 victims were all Muslims. The main victims of ISIS were Muslims. Despite that fact, the Western media and some of the Western politicians took advantage of those a few attacks that occurred on Western soil to demonize Muslims in general and to give a horrible image about Islam as a religion. And I would also like to comment on the horrible statements made by the Australian politician by the name of Fraser Anning. While people were still bleeding from their wounds, while people were still dying in the hospitals or still in the mosque dying, this Australian politician came out with a horrible, disgusting statement in which he says that the cause behind those attacks was the growing insecurity and fear of Muslim presence on Western soil in Australia and New Zealand. He actually blamed the attacks on the victims. he said that those victims are responsible for what happened to them, as if those people only came to this land to get killed. He says that immigration policies, and for those people to come to this land, that is why they were killed. What does this tell you? This tells you how savage and barbaric an ideology this man has, and that this kind of rhetoric, this Islamophobic and anti-immigration rhetoric, is the main cause for hatred that such people as this attacker had in their hearts. Those feelings of hatred and evil towards another religion or another race are only ignited and fueled by such comments made by public figures. He goes on, this man, not only to attack the victims and consider them as the perpetrator and consider them as the cause for that attack, he goes on to vilify and demonize Islam as a whole, and calling it a political violent ideology with savage teachings, which he has no proof of whatsoever. Because anybody who studies Islam will know that Islam is the most just and the most peaceful religion on this earth, and that Muslim people in general are the most peaceful and most law-abiding and most compassionate people on this earth. And people who have had Muslim friends or dealt with Muslims on their daily life as co-workers or in any kind of daily dealings with Muslims will know how kind and compassionate and peaceful and just Muslims in general are. But this man tries to give you the exact opposite image. He considers Islam as a violent, barbaric and savage ideology masquerading as a religion. The same kind of comments were made by senior US politicians such as Michael Flynn, when he says that Islam is a violent political ideology hiding behind the notion of it being a religion. He also goes on to say that Islam is a malignant cancer in the body of 1.7 billion people that we have to resect. You can see from the sayings of such people who is the actual terrorist, who is the aggressor. It is those kind of politicians and public figures who rally the masses behind them to hate people of other race, to hate people of Islam in particular. It is now very normal in the Western media and by Western politicians to denounce Islam and to talk in such a horrible way about Islam as a religion. And their talk is not based on any scientific or any logical or any proof or any logic or any proof. It is just because those people have acquired this hate and they want to spread it to the masses. They want to rally the masses to hate Muslims as well and to commit such attacks. There is so much growing Islamophobia and right-wing extremism in the West, and the politicians and the public figures some politicians and some public figures are only fueling that, and they're happy by this, and they are basically pushing the world to becoming pushing the whole world to becoming a very unsafe place by what they're saying. And then this man, Fraser Anning, goes on to say that Muslims are killing innocent people are all around the world on an industrial scale. And this is the exact opposite of the truth. Muslims are the ones who are being killed all over the world on an industrial scale. You can see how many Muslims have been killed in the Afghan wars, in the Afghanistan invasion by the US, and the Iraq invasion by the US. Millions and millions and millions of Muslims have been killed and displaced and deprived of the basic needs and necessities of life because of those invasions. It is Muslim lands that are being invaded, not the Muslims that who are invading other countries. Muslims are not the invaders. Muslims are the victims of invasions in Afghanistan, invasion in Iraq, invasion in Somalia. Actually, even the Syrian war, all the atrocities and the million people killed, the 6 million who are externally displaced and the 6 million who are internally displaced, those are victims of state terrorism by a non-Muslim government, the government of Bashar al-Assad. People in the West don't know this, but Bashar al-Assad is not a Muslim, and his sect, who are called the Alawites, they are not a Muslim sect, and Muslims are actually basically the victim. And the whole world has been watching this man killing people for over 8 years, and nobody wants to do anything about it, because the victims are Muslims. Muslim blood does not matter anymore in the eyes of this world. Also, Iran, people think Islam is an Islamic government. Iran is not an Islamic government. Shiism is not Islam. Shiism is also an offshoot from Islam that has become a totally separate religion. And Western governments pretend as if they have a conflict with Iran, and they really don't have a conflict with Iran. They've been talking for years and years and years that Iran is developing a nuclear program, that we have to stop Iran, and that Iran and its organizations like Hezbollah are terrorist organizations, and nobody's doing anything about it. Iran is the cause for conflicts, is supporting the conflict in Syria. Iran is the cause for the conflict in Yemen as well. And Muslims are the victim in those countries as well. Muslims are also the victim of imperialism by countries that support dictatorships in Muslim countries. Even when Muslims elect certain governments that they are pleased with, it is because of those imperialistic influences on dictators in these countries. Then Muslims do not get to choose their own presidents, because then what would happen is a military coup that would take out this democratically elected president. Muslims are not governed by themselves, even in their own countries. You can see this happen. This has happened in Egypt. This has happened before that in Algeria, and that led to a civil war in which more than 150,000 Muslims were also killed. Muslims are actually the victims. They are not the aggressors. Muslims are peaceful people. They are not terrorists. It is the media that is giving the West the impression that Muslims are killing people in an industrial scale, while Muslims are being killed and oppressed and treated in a horrible way worldwide in an industrial scale. You can see what happened to the Muslims in Myanmar or Burma, where almost 1 million Muslims were displaced in 1 month because of the genocide that was carried against them by the Myanmar and Burmese government, military, and the extremist Buddhist militias. Also, Muslims are being detained in huge detention centers like concentration camps. Right now, as we speak, in China, more than 2 million Muslims are detained in Western China because they are detained in Western China to denounce their religion, because China does not want Islam to be practiced on its land. Even just to say the greetings of Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you, which is a Muslim greeting, is an offense in China right now. To have the Quran, to read the Quran, or to pray 5 times a day is an offense in China. Muslims are being oppressed in an industrial scale. They are not the terrorists, they are not the aggressors, and the West has to know that. I hope this commentary is useful, and I plan to further talk about how Muslims are the victims of Islamophobia in the Western media and at the hands of Western public figures and politicians. I would just like to add one more fact here, that a country like the US, from 2008 to 2018, over the span of 10 years, studies have shown, and you will see this in the PowerPoint presentation below, studies have shown that the victims of gun violence during that time are over 170,000 people. Guess how many people were killed at the hands of Muslim extremists in the US out of the 170,000 people who were gunned down using firearms, or killed by mass shooters, or just killed by individuals who shoot an individual. More than 170,000, some studies have said 190,000 people. Out of this big number, only 90 people were killed by Muslim extremists. But then they try to show you that the biggest threat to the West and to the US is the Muslims, while they have more than 170,000 people killed by different shooters, and most of the mass shooters were white Christian shooters, as you all know, like Dylan Roof and the Las Vegas shooter and other shooters. But still, they want to give you the impression that Muslims are the ones who are responsible for most of the killings and most of the acts of terror and most of the acts of violence in the West. Out of 170 to 190,000 people, Muslim extremists were responsible for 90 deaths and the hundreds of, more than 100,000, maybe more than 170,000 people were killed by other shooters, but still, they want to tell you that Muslims are the only terrorists, the only aggressors, the only violent people, the only savage people, the only barbaric people on this earth. I hope this is hopeful to open the eyes and hearts of people to see the reality, and that Muslims are actually the victims, they are not the aggressors. Thank you for watching.